Only a few years after his marriage to Priscilla, Elvis met and fell in love with actress Barbara Leigh.
I met Elvis in Las Vegas at the Hilton with Jim Aubrey. Jim Aubrey was the president of MGM Studios, and he was my boyfriend at the time. And they had done the movie That's the Way It Is with Elvis. So he took me up to see Elvis's show.
When she came in, I saw how stunning she was, and I went back. Elvis was getting dressed. I went in the dressing room. I said, Elvis, when do you come outside and see this gorgeous girl that James Aubrey's with? So, sure enough, he came out of the dressing room after he got all dressed up and walked over. I walked out, and he walked over to Mr. Aubrey and introduced himself, and he introduced me to Barbara, and he looked over at me and nodded his head like I was right.
The first meeting was in the dressing room with a lot of people around, and he had a table that was kind of centered in the center of the room, and I was sitting in this table talking to Chris Nelson, Ricky Nelson's wife, and I felt the presence, and I kind of turned around, and there he was sitting and staring me in the eyes, and he complimented me, and then he asked me if I'd like to come back and see his show, and I said, of course. So he handed me under the table a little pad and pencil, skinny little pencil. He was all prepared.
He kept looking at Barbara, talking to Barbara little by little, and before that evening was over, Elvis had Barbara Lee's phone number, and that was the start of a long romance together.
I went in for what I thought was one night because I had plans for the weekend, but when I got there, my plans changed. Elvis talked me into staying for the whole weekend. We did become romantic. Who wouldn't, right? He was just gorgeous. That's when he was thin, and he was beautiful and handsome, and he had, like you say, he was very spiritual and charisma. He was the king, you know. He was sexy, great kisser.
Elvis was very enchanted by Barbara Leigh. She was very striking, very beautiful lady, dark hair, beautiful face, beautiful figure. She was very a very sexy-looking lady.
In the back of my mind, I knew he was a married man, so I didn't think about that, really. Elvis had a soul, and it just came out in his performances and his singing and in his everyday life, the way he dealt with people. He was the most giving, kindest person that I'd ever known. He bought me a car, Mercedes. I guess timing is everything. I happened to be around when he was buying Mercedes, and so I got one. He bought me guns and jewelry and things like that, clothes. He had a great sense of humor, and he liked to joke all the time, make fun, and it was a lot of fun. One funny experience that I had with him was I brought a girlfriend to see him, to meet him in Palm Springs, and when I walked in the door, he was there, and I thought, he looks different, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And he started doing his karate exhibit. He put on his gi with the guys, with Charlie, and he was doing, really getting into it, and this wig went flying off. And everybody just stopped because no one knew how to handle it quite. They didn't want to laugh until he laughed. And he basically laughed, picked it up and put it back on his head, and then everybody laughed, and he just continued with the exhibition. He was magic. Everything about him was magic. When he was performing, he gave everything to the audience, and I think that people identified with his soul and the tenderness and the loving part of him. He was a true gentleman, Southern gentleman. I think that he just had a wonderful spirit that will live forever, that he was kind, and besides having the most beautiful voice, just even today it's hard to beat his voice, he was magic.